Police Members Association is Mr. Charles Mancer, Vice President. Mr. Mancer, welcome. Accompanying him is Marc-Andre Fournier, Director. And we understand that you have an opening statement. Please begin.
Good afternoon. I'm with Marc-Andre Fournier. I'm the Vice President of the Quebec Mounted Police Members Association. My presentation will be rather brief. I will introduce myself so you know who I am, and I will talk to you about my field of expertise, after which we will be able to answer your questions. For 17 years now, I've been in the RCMP. I worked in Surrey in BC. I worked 3 years as a contract officer, after which I worked in Montreal, especially in financial crime, money laundering, or fraud, for example. My field of expertise became this kind of crime. I also worked for a long time in representing staff in the former system that was unconstitutional pursuant to Supreme Court. I'm also an advisor for the new system that was implemented on the 17th of May 2016 after the Supreme Court decision. With regards to my education, I studied in a very number of fields, 2 years in engineering management at McGill. I got a certificate in that field. And my graduate field finally was civil law and common law. I'm a member of the Ontario Bar. The biggest experience for me was over the past 12 months, where I spent a lot of time as Vice President of this association to try and convince members of the RCMP to fill the legal criteria to unionize. This was very difficult. The important point I would like to make in my presentation is that those who are involved in such RCMP associations are volunteers. It's very different to other acts or bills that you will consider where unions already have significant financial resources. We do not have that luxury in our association. We do not have financial resources. We're volunteers that use money put forth by members of the RCMP. And that is where the difference lies. Members of the RCMP are not allowed to unionize. They cannot join a union. I met a number of unions that already exist. They have a $400 million strike fund. They have very significant resources. In the framework of unionizing 18,000 staff, the budget for such a union would be $9 million. We are far from this sum in our coffers. My opening statement, therefore, if you want to have a better service to Canadians, what we need is a resolution to this unionization issue, taking into account our budget and the fact that we are also volunteers who work in our personal time. The quicker we reach union status, the quicker the issues before you that will be able to be removed from the table so that it arrives on our table so that we can debate upon it in a fair way with our employer. I will now answer your questions.
I'd like to start with Senator Jaffer and then Senator White.
Merci beaucoup pour votre présence.
Thank you for your presence.
When you appeared on C7, you spoke about that there were a number of exclusions, and you were quite vocal in the internal grievance process, and you were saying that at the moment there is an internal grievance process run by the RCMP, and these internal grievance decision makers are commissioned officers, but they're below the commissioner, and aside from the bias inherent in that, they cannot make decisions that the commissioner does not like. Do you still hold that same opinion?
Can you just repeat the end about the commissioner, right?
That these officers are sort of immediately under the commissioner of police, and they tend to make decisions that the commissioner likes. That's what you said last time, and I wanted to know if the situation is still the same.
La situation est encore la même.
The situation is still the same when it comes to the grievance process in the RCMP. The grievance process was recently reformed in November 2014. There has since been improvements that are not enough. The important factor that I believe needs to be understood is the fact that members begin a grievance process in order to seek remedy to a problem. Pursuant to the former system, results came in 5 to 6 years. Now it takes 1 to 2 years. If we try to approach officers to rectify a problem, and if the problem isn't rectified, I have to go beyond the grievance process, which is an infinitesimal part of what was affected by C-42. We must also talk about the RCMP's disciplinary process. The Commissioner came before you and in the past asked for more problems to tackle internal issues to the RCMP. These extended powers were conferred upon him pursuant to C-42. Now, with these extended powers, with the disciplinary process, before November 2014, per year, there were about 200 disciplinary files. In 2015, there were 700. That is 3.5 times more. What this means concretely for RCMP officers having 3.5 times the number of files and even more in 2016, RCMP officers now fear disciplinary processes. And most of them, and I talk about the experience of what I saw as an advisor and the association, are perfectly frivolous. The Commissioner gave an order. It trickled down the hierarchy saying, if you do not begin disciplinary process, not only will you be responsible, or you will be even more than responsible, and so officers have concerns. With regards to resources, officers that are accused and believe that they are accused frivolously, they are disengaged. I represented others that simply quit. A member was the subject of 3 accusations. He did his job correctly, but the officer believed that it was enough for there to be a disciplinary process against them. 2 of the accusations were thrown out. He was accused of the 3rd. I'm sure he will be acquitted of the 3rd as well. However, he quit. This is a member with 11 years of service, with very high qualification levels. This is an issue for resources, but let us use the resources we already have. The 11-year member was very skilled, and he simply went elsewhere for a job. He now works elsewhere. The grievance process is a good idea. However, there are other issues on a disciplinary front.
Senator White and then Senator Dagenet.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the 2 witnesses for being here. My question surrounds contact with members of the RCMP. Within most workplaces, it's single location or maybe a couple of locations where contact with potential future union members is done through bulletin boards and things like that. Is it true that you're not permitted to have access to the internal mail system to contact members of the RCMP just to engage as to whether or not they're interested in certification?
C'est une excellente question. Je vous remercie beaucoup.
Excellent question. Thank you very much.
Je préfère.
I would like to answer in French, if I may. My answer will be more specific in French. This is an excellent question. The issue of how to communicate with members is an important one. A bit more context. We do not have the financial resources as a union to present ourselves in front of every single building every single day to try and meet every single member. We do not have the financial capacity to do so. Therefore, we cannot use the email system. It is forbidden for us to do so. Some people have sent emails and that have since been subject of disciplinary proceedings. We verified the issue, and it seems that the decision to ban us from emailing in that way is legal. We're not allowed to use the internal email system. What recourse, therefore, do we have to communicate with members in their workplace? The law allows communication outside of working hours. Section 187 of the relevant act. On the 20th of May 2016, I was with Paul Dupuis, the head of the Quebec Mounted Police Members Association. We went to the Montreal headquarters and we told them that we had rented a commercial space next to their building where we were there to answer their questions and where they could sign their cards. The head of the unit was informed, and he engaged disciplinary process with me because he believed that I was soliciting people for union purposes. I complained, and my hearing is at the end of March, until which I am still convicted for having simply been next to Paul Dupuis. Paul Dupuis was not accused. I don't know why. The card signing process is very difficult. We have a lack of resources to do so. I believe that if there is a message to convey today, is that the quicker we create a union in the RCMP, the quicker we will be able to find a resolution to these problems. Having a system with only 40 to 50% of signed cards is a target that's very difficult, especially because we have to keep in mind the very unique context of the RCMP, where there are three associations: the Provincial Association in Quebec, so we're not really part of the problem. There are two clashing associations that do not want to merge. Regardless of the solution you will choose, you will have to find a solution that takes into account the extant dichotomy with the two current associations.
Time is relatively short, and we do have a number of other members that have questions. So if you just want to conclude your remarks there, please.
J'ai terminé la réponse, donc...
I've finished what I had to say, and so I'll answer to the next question.
Yes, if I may, with a follow-up, supplement, is that okay? Yeah, please. Yeah, I will. No, and I appreciate, I mean, in your case, it's in relation to Quebec, but do you understand that that's also an issue with any other organization who's trying to certify across the country in 800 communities, isolation from Tuktoyaktuk to Fogo Island? Is that correct with those organizations as well?
If I may, the reality that we're facing is tremendous, and quite frankly, I don't know how we're going to make it happen as quickly as we'd like to. And just to add on to your previous question and you're asking, and I'll let you guys come up to your own conclusions, but to understand what kind of employer we're facing right now, you have code of conduct situations like Mr. Mancer is facing right now, which you have to ask yourself, what is the end goal for every of this? If we were here to, and it has been said by the previous associations as well, our goal is to work with management to better our situation. And all the steps that have been taken so far show us otherwise. I had to take my personal trailer and my personal truck, park it in front of our HQ in Montreal, and set it up so that members would come inside and sign. And the main thing we faced was like the people were afraid of even getting in my trailer because they're being videotaped, and they didn't want that to hinder their career. So I let you come up to your own conclusions as to what we're facing as far as all the other problems that we may have financially or territorially, but we're also facing a big machine, and it's going to be hard to make it happen.
Merci beaucoup.
Janae and then Senator Meredith.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to our two witnesses. If I understood you correctly, Mr. Mancer, rather, your employer is not making your life very easy when it comes to membership cards. Everything needs to be done externally. Your colleague said that people feared being seen next to his trailer. It's not an easy situation. What is the acceptable percentage that you need in voting in member cards for there to be a union? You do not have the financial means to communicate with them. Would you like there to be 30 or 40% of membership? You need a certain number of percentage points in order to get to the status of union. I think the maximum should be 30, ideally 25. This would be sufficient. Where the problem lies is that in Quebec, following the intimidation from the employer, we found it very hard to get people to sign the membership cards. Yes, people fear to enter the trailer, his trailer, in order to sign their card. However, it is hard to find people to actually go out and communicate with people telling them to sign. 25% would be ideal, because it's a famous rule of the thirds. A third are for unionization, 1/3 are indifferent, and 1/3 are against. Another question. I understand that the Federal Labour Act forces federal unions to have membership cards, but as you mentioned, if you're part of an RCMP union, you're not allowed to be part of another union, as is the case elsewhere. And so I understand that we could eliminate the membership cards and just have a secret ballot, which would make things very much easier for you. There have never been membership cards in other policing bodies. When you're hired, you're unionized immediately, and then there's a secret ballot. A secret ballot would make your life easier, is that not right? The quickest solution would be the solution that allows us to elect representatives. If we remove the membership step, then that would be good. If all we need would be a two-step vote. First of all, would you like a union, yes or no? If the answer is yes, what association would you like to have that will represent you? And then one of the associations will represent the members. This would be a very expeditious process. You use the federal labor statutes that unionizes people. There should be an act to have an RCMP union. The Public Service Labor Relations Act is tailored, well, it could be tailored to the RCMP, and so please adopt an act that is tailored to our situation. So I understand that a secret ballot would resolve your problems. If that would lead to an expeditious voting process, then yes.
Thank you, Chair. The same question there with respect to collaboration of the three, the Federation, the Association, and the Quebec Mounted Police Association. What kind of collaboration are you doing, working together with respect to, because you're going after the same membership, same members with respect to sign up and so forth, and the same resources. So what collaboration is taking place between all three of you?
Je vais vous donner des chiffres. Il y a une collaboration.
I'll give you some numbers. Since the beginning, we've asked there to be a merger of all three associations. However, this association of associations hasn't been possible at the moment. There's a certain issue. I don't think that there will be a merger between the NPF and the BC organization. There is a division between the two. And so there is very little collaboration on that front. There needs, therefore, to be a tailored act to this issue, be it through a vote or membership cards. We need to face this issue head-on in order to try and beat this issue. For the past 12 months, I've tried to strike a merger, but I do believe it will simply not happen. The Quebec Association is in negotiations with others, but between themselves, they're not talking.
Concern, Mr. Mancer, is that the problems that we've heard from all three of you with respect to morale and lack of resources and so forth continues, while these three associations sort of duel it out for this kind of membership. So who's the members still not further advanced with respect to you coming together? So how are we going to get there? And in terms of just the broader security risk to Canadians on a whole, how do we get there?
I'm going to just tell you one thing very important. The faster we have an election, so we can select the members that are going to represent the other members, the better it's going to be. Les associations, à ce point-ci, en fait, ce n'est.
Right now, the important thing is the elections. We need to adopt legislation that will allow us to hold those elections. We could even regulate an election, but we need to reach a point where we can do that. I think that's the only way.
Ask RCMP members tomorrow to take a vote whether or not they're gonna vote for a union or not. I think that's unequivocal. It's yes. Members want a union out of the members that are going to vote. Now, whether or not who's going to represent them, that's another story. But the thing is that you need to realize is that if you can provide us with a legislative framework that gets us to be accredited as fast as possible, or more easily, if you will, then members are going to get representation. Representation is going to get us better resources, better pay, better everything, and all the issues that we've discussed here today.
Do you want to just follow up very quickly? Senator Mancer?
No, it just sort of ties into, yes, and we get that. Know that we need to ensure that we have legislation so that you're fully accredited and so forth. On the broader scope, Mr. Mancer, you talk about your background in finance, and we see that there's been over 300 identified sort of, individuals in Canada that's been, radicalized, and in fact that 400 cases have been identified with respect to terrorism finance. Can you elaborate for me as to what needs to be done on that front, given the fact that your membership is the ones who investigate and bring these charges to the fore?
Okay. Ce qu'il faut réussir à faire, c'est
What needs to be done is that those who work for us, investigating those individuals, need to be motivated and engaged in investigations. Right now, people are worried that disciplinary proceedings will be undertaken regarding them, and they're worried. Very often, they have to undergo disciplinary proceedings for frivolous reasons. So they're worried and they want to protect themselves. And I'm not even mentioning the lack of resources and equipment. Current resources are underutilized. A lot of our officers are afraid of acting, and they just follow orders blindly because that's the easiest way to get by in the RCMP. It's easier for them to just follow superiors' orders.
Et c'est là le problème, c'est que
And that's the problem. The RCMP should follow some rules that exist in the business world, like Innovation 3M, which is part of the culture of the business, because as soon as you want to innovate in investigations, well, if you want to figure out which person among 300 suspects plans to commit a bombing or other crime, well, you need to depend on people with expertise. Unfortunately, now there isn't enough expertise. People come in for 2 or 3 years and then are sent to work elsewhere. When there's the potential for a terrorist attack to be committed, the chances of detecting it are low because the clues mean that you need to talk to all sorts of people before you can make out patterns. This means that we need a balanced workplace, and that means that we need to have a union. Thank you.
On the record here. In view of the fact that C7 has not proceeded, am I to understand that you're in a position that you really cannot organize because there's not a legislative framework in place to be able to put your whatever union is chosen to put it in place for the purposes of negotiating a collective agreement? Am I understanding correct?
la réponse courte, c'est en ce moment avec
Well, right now, with the existing Public Service Labor Relations Act, that's the legislation that applies to us at the moment. That means that we need 40%, a 40% level of membership cards, and we don't have that yet. The associations taken individually haven't reached that threshold, and even taken as a group, we don't have it either.
Under the Public Service Staff Relations Act, as it presently exists and for the purpose of what you're doing?
Oui.
Yes. Okay. Senator White?
Supplemental, if I may,
Yes.
Mr. Chair. And I put it in, I'm not sure if I got it. But if I understand correctly, C4, if the new legislation C4, not C7, but C4, public service staff relations legislation, it would allow you to go forward to a labor board without 40%. Isn't that correct?
J'ai consacré au-delà de 20 heures à étudier cette question.
I've been studying that very issue for more than 20 hours, and I have C4 here with me. It states in its latest version that it is necessary to convince the Labor Relations Board that the association represents the majority of employees. I don't know how that will be interpreted. We're talking about section 64(1)(a).
Was that you have an opportunity to appear and explain why the majority is not available to you. In the case of the RCMP, with 800 communities, 700 and some detachments located across every province and territory, from here to Timbuktu and back, my understanding is there would be an opportunity in that legislation. And to be fair, I got that from the other two organizations who are trying to look for a national police association or union. My understanding was that C4 would allow that to occur. Hey, look, you're legally trained. I'm not.
I would say it would depend on your definition of majority. If majority is 50 plus 1, we're going backwards in time because right now we have to satisfy the 40%.
The solution offered in section 65, it says that the board may order that the representation vote be taken.
That's right.
So
that could allow it. If it gives you an argument.
Okay, colleagues.
Ça va être une interprétation qui va devoir.
That interpretation will need to be made. It could be clearer in the long term. It could be clarified.
There is some lack of clarity here, obviously. But I want to thank our witnesses for appearing.
Can I just add one comment before you close everything?
Go ahead.
Je me suis posé la question.
I have asked myself why the issue of unionization scared the current government and why spokes were being placed on our wheels. And one of the issues is the financial aspect of unionization. So I have a document that I'd like to table. When it comes to mediation, the mediator needs to consider some sections of the Act before raising salaries or giving us further benefits. This is Section 148 of the Labor Relations Act, and there's also 238.21 of C7. Under all of these cases, the mediator needs to take these factors into account. Manon Brassard, as well, who works for the Treasury Board, stated before MPs that the budgetary increase would be only 0.25%. So there are no major costs associated to mediation and the formation of a union within the RCMP. That is why I cannot understand why this is not moving more quickly.
And that's in part why you're here, and we certainly appreciate the fact that you've taken the time to come here. We'd like to excuse our witnesses